Evan was a boy of 16, but life had already been very hard for him. He lived in a small, dirty street where the walls were cracked and the ground was full of broken glass. Every morning he woke up to loud noises. Dogs barked, neighbors shouted, and the wind carried the sound of broken doors and slamming windows. The air smelled old and cold, and even the sunlight seemed weak. His mother was always tired. Sometimes she slept all day. Sometimes she cried quietly in the dark. Sometimes she screamed without reason. Evan learned to be quiet, to hide his hunger, and to move like a shadow so that nobody noticed him. His father was never there. He had left when Evan was very young. There were no hugs, no kind words, no advice, only silence. School was not better. The classrooms were cold, the desks were broken, and the teachers were often angry. Other children laughed at Evan. They laughed at his worn-out shoes, his thin arms, and his old bag. They called him names and pushed him in the hallways. He tried to stay quiet, sit at the back, and avoid trouble. Still, every day felt heavy and lonely. At home, things were worse. The lights barely worked. The fridge was often empty. The nights were long and cold. He covered himself with a thin blanket and counted numbers to fall asleep. He wished for warm food, soft beds, and a hug that smelled like love. Evan had only one small hope: the library. It was warm, quiet, and filled with books. The library became his secret place. He could sit among the shelves, read stories about brave heroes, and imagine a life different from his own. He loved acting out scenes from the stories quietly, speaking lines to the empty room while pretending the books were his audience. It made him feel alive for a moment. Every day he faced hunger. Sometimes he skipped meals. Sometimes he begged for coins or scraps of bread. Still, he learned to smile even when his stomach hurt, because inside he carried a small flame of hope. He told himself, "One day my life will change. I will be more than this street. I will be someone important." Then one night, everything changed. His mother disappeared. No goodbye. No note. Evan searched the neighborhood, asked neighbors, called hospitals, but nobody had seen her. He knocked on doors, begged for answers, but everything stayed silent. Soon after, the landlord kicked him out because there was no rent. The streets became his only home. He had no family, no warm bed, and no food. Just the cold, the noise, and his own small bag with a few possessions. The streets were cruel. Cold wind cut through his thin jacket. Rain soaked him to the bone. He slept on dirty cardboard and cold benches. Sometimes people ignored him, sometimes they laughed. Yet he survived. And through it all, he never gave up. In the library, he discovered a world of hope. He read about heroes who faced impossible problems. He read about people who turned sadness into courage, weakness into strength. He practiced the lines from books, acted out characters, and dreamed quietly under the dim lights. Even the rats seemed to watch him, like a tiny audience that never judged. One rainy evening, Evan decided to perform outside. He stood near the train station, shouted lines from a famous play, moved his hands, danced, and spoke with all his heart. Passers-by laughed or ignored him, but some smiled. A small audience of other homeless people cheered. And then he noticed a man in a big coat, standing silently and watching. The man's eyes were kind. They carried curiosity, patience, and interest. The man approached him slowly and asked, "Why do you act like this?" Evan explained everything quickly: the library, the empty streets, the cold nights, and his dreams. The man nodded and gave him a small card. "Come here tomorrow," he said. Evan held the card close, like it was a treasure. It was the first sign of real hope he had felt in years. That night, he lay under the stars on the cold street, clutching the card. He whispered his dreams aloud, promising himself that he would try harder, practice more, and never give up. For the first time in a long time, he slept with a small, real smile. The next morning, Evan walked to the address on the card. His shoes were old, his jacket thin, but inside him burned hope. The building was tall, clean, and warm, so different from the broken streets he knew. He entered slowly, heart pounding, hands shaking, wondering if this was a real chance or just another disappointment. Inside, the man from the night before introduced himself as Mr. Howard. He smiled and said, "We believe in second chances. Show us what you can do." Evan's heart raced. He felt nervous, scared, and excited all at once. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, the broken shoes, and whispered, "I will not give up." He stood tall, even though his legs shook. He spoke the lines from memory, acted with feeling, and gave everything he had. When he finished, Mr. Howard smiled warmly. "Kid, you have something rare. Something real," he said. Evan's heart soared. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. And at that moment, Evan knew that no matter how hard the streets were, no matter how lonely the nights, he would never give up. His story had just begun. The next morning, Evan woke up early, shivering from the cold but feeling a small spark of hope. He clutched the card Mr. Howard had given him and remembered his promise, "I will not give up." He walked carefully to the building, his thin jacket flapping in the wind, shoes worn and dirty, but his heart beating fast with excitement. Inside, the office smelled warm, like coffee and paper. People moved around quickly, busy with work, but they didn't scare him. Today, he had a purpose. Mr. Howard greeted him with a kind smile. "Ready to show us a small scene?" he asked. Evan nodded. His hands shook, but he took a deep breath. He remembered the nights in the library, acting alone, imagining an audience that cared. Today, that practice mattered. He stood in the middle of the room, closed his eyes, and imagined the story. The scene was simple, a small boy helping a lost tourist. He had only a few lines, but he spoke them with feeling. He smiled, offered directions, and acted as if his heart was guiding him. At first, his voice trembled. Words stumbled. But then he remembered every cold night, every empty stomach, every small hope he had ever held. Suddenly, his small action felt big. He moved naturally, laughed softly, and spoke from the heart. The people in the room watched silently, eyes fixed on him. When the scene ended, they smiled. Mr. Howard nodded and said, "Good. Very good. You have something special, Evan." Evan felt a warm glow inside. It was the first time he realized that even small actions could change something. Acting for just a few minutes, with a few lines, could show the world who he really was. It was not fame, not money. It was hope, courage, and determination. After that, Mr. Howard gave him small exercises to practice. Every day, Evan repeated short scenes, learned simple lines, and acted them out with feeling. Even though his life outside the building was still hard, with cold nights and empty pockets, he now had a purpose. Each small step was a piece of a bigger dream. For the first time, Evan understood something important. Progress does not come all at once. Big changes start with small actions. Even a single smile, a few words spoken with care, or a tiny act of courage could make a difference. And today, that difference was for him. He left the building that evening, holding the small note Mr. Howard had given him. The streets were still cold, the sidewalks still dirty, but Evan walked with a new feeling. He felt lighter, stronger, and ready to take the next small step toward his dreams. That night, he lay under the stars, hugging his jacket and whispering lines from the scene. He smiled quietly, thinking, "This is only the beginning. I will keep going. I will keep trying." And for the first time in a long time, he believed that tomorrow could be brighter than today. A few weeks passed, and Evan kept practicing every day. He learned small scenes, repeated lines, and acted with feeling. Each day, he felt a little stronger, a little braver. But life outside the office was still difficult. One rainy evening, as Evan walked home from the library, he noticed a group of older boys blocking the narrow street. Their faces were harsh, their voices loud. "Hey, street boy," one of them sneered. "What are you doing here? Lost your way?" Evan tried to move past quietly, but they stepped in front of him, laughing. One boy grabbed his thin jacket and pushed him roughly. Evan stumbled, heart racing, fear climbing in his chest. He had faced cold nights, hunger, and loneliness, but this felt different. His small hope flickered like a candle in the wind. "You don't belong here," another boy said, pushing him again. "Go back to your trash corner." Evan's first instinct was to run, but he remembered Mr. Howard's words, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it." He stood still, shaking, hands clenching into fists. He took a deep breath and tried to speak clearly. "I have a place too. I can't leave my dreams." The boys laughed louder. One threw a small stone near his feet. "Dreams? You're just a weak boy. Nothing can save you." Evan's stomach tightened, and his legs felt like ice. For a moment he thought of giving up. The library, the small room with Mr. Howard, the stars above the streets, they all seemed far away. But then he remembered the nights he acted alone, the small audience of books and empty streets that had cheered him silently. He thought of the few people who had believed in him, like Mr. Howard, who had given him a tiny chance. With a trembling voice, he said, "I won't stop. I won't let fear take me away." The boys looked confused at his courage. One of them stepped back slightly. Another laughed mockingly but didn't push him again. Evan's heart pounded, but he slowly walked past them, keeping his head high, feeling a small surge of pride. He realized that even small courage could protect him, even when the world seemed against him. That night, Evan lay under the stars again, soaking wet from the rain. But this time, he didn't feel defeated. He had faced danger, fear, and cruelty, yet he survived. His steps were slower, his heart tired, but a new thought grew inside him. I can face more than I think. I am stronger than I feel. The challenge had been big, real, and frightening, but Evan knew something important now. The streets would always be harsh, people would always judge, and obstacles would always appear. But with courage, even small, trembling courage, he could keep moving forward. Evan whispered to himself, "Tomorrow I will try again. I will act again. I will keep my dream alive, no matter what." The next day, Evan arrived at the small acting studio with hope in his heart. He had prepared a new scene, memorized every line, and imagined the audience clapping for him. He felt ready. Maybe today, his dream would take a small step forward. But things did not go as he imagined. Inside the studio, a new director watched him coldly. "Start," the director said without a smile. Evan spoke his lines carefully, acted with feeling, and tried to show all the courage he had built. But the director's face remained serious. "That's not good enough," the director said sharply. "You need more emotion. You're flat. You don't belong here." Evan felt his heart drop. His hands trembled, his voice shook, and his knees felt weak. All the nights he had spent practicing alone, all the courage he had gathered, felt small and useless. He tried again, but each time, the director shook his head, frowning more and more. After several attempts, the director finally said, "Thank you, that's enough." Evan left the room quietly, head low, heart heavy. He felt a cold emptiness spreading inside him. Doubt whispered cruel words. "Maybe you aren't good enough. Maybe your dreams are too big. Maybe you are just a street boy who will never belong." Walking home, rain poured over him. He pulled his thin jacket tight, but it did little to protect him. For the first time in weeks, Evan felt hopeless. The streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the lonely library corners, all of it seemed heavier now. He wanted to cry, but he kept walking, trying to hold back the tears. That night, he sat under the bridge, his small bag by his side. He looked at the dark sky and whispered, "Why can't it be easier? Why do I have to fight so hard for just a little chance?" The library and the stars above felt far away, almost unreachable. Evan's small dreams felt fragile, as if one wrong step could break them completely. For the first time, he wondered if giving up might be easier. He opened his notebook, the one he had written in for months, full of dreams, lines, and hopes. But even looking at it did not give him strength tonight. His small victories felt meaningless, and he wondered if anyone would ever see him really see him. Tears ran silently down his cheeks. He hugged his knees, wishing for warmth, wishing for a kind hand to hold, wishing that someone, anyone, would tell him he was enough. But the streets remained quiet, cold, and unforgiving. Evan closed his eyes and whispered a small promise. "Even if I fail, I will not stop forever. I need a little time. I need to breathe." The setback was deep, heavy, and painful. It shook Evan's courage to the core. But even in that darkness, a small flicker of hope remained, a tiny light that said, "This is not the end. You can try again." Evan sat under the bridge, the rain still dripping from his jacket, feeling small and heavy. His failure at the studio replayed in his mind like a movie he could not pause. The director's sharp words, the shaking heads, the disappointed frown, every detail burned into his memory. For the first time, he thought maybe his dreams were too big for a boy like him. But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, "Don't give up yet." The next morning, Evan woke early, his body stiff from sleeping on the cold ground, but his heart carried a flicker of determination. He decided he would not let one setback end his journey. He went to the library, his safe place, and sat at his usual desk. The warm walls, the smell of old books, and the quiet around him gave him comfort. He opened his notebook and began writing again. Not just lines or dreams, but his thoughts, his fears, and the lessons he learned from the failure. "I may have failed yesterday," he wrote, "but I am not finished. I can learn. I can grow. I will try again." Evan remembered the small joy he had felt performing for the stars, for the cold wind, for the few kind people who had clapped for him in the streets. That memory gave him strength. He practiced lines aloud in the library, his voice soft at first, then louder, more confident. He acted quietly in empty corners, imagining the audience in front of him, listening, smiling, cheering. With each repetition, he felt a little braver, a little stronger. One day, while reading a story about a boy who overcame great challenges, Evan noticed something important. The hero did not succeed alone. He had friends, mentors, and helpers along the way. Evan realized he had been trying to carry everything by himself. He decided it was time to ask for guidance, even if it felt scary. He remembered Mr. Howard, the man in the big coat who had watched him perform near the train station. Evan had a small card with his address and phone number. With shaky hands, he dialed the number. A warm voice answered. "Hello, sir," Evan said, his voice trembling. "It's me, Evan. I need help. I want to try again. I want to be better." There was silence for a moment. Then the voice said softly, "Come to my office tomorrow. We will work together." Evan could not believe it. His heart raced with hope. He spent the night under the library roof, imagining the next day, practicing lines, whispering words to himself. He repeated them until they became part of him. When morning came, he walked to the address slowly, careful with every step, feeling small and nervous, but also excited. Mr. Howard welcomed him warmly. "Don't worry about the past, Evan," he said. "We will start fresh. Let's work on your voice, your emotion, your confidence. I'll guide you." For the next few weeks, Evan worked harder than ever. Each day, he learned something new: how to use his voice to show feelings, how to move naturally, how to express hope and fear without hiding. He practiced small scenes, acted in front of mirrors, read aloud to the walls, and even performed for strangers on quiet streets. Every small success gave him strength. Every small mistake became a lesson. One afternoon, Mr. Howard gave him a small scene to perform for a real director. Evan's heart thumped loudly. He remembered the past failure but chose to focus on the learning. He stood up, took a deep breath, and acted. He spoke each line with care, moved his hands, his eyes alive with emotion. When he finished, the director smiled. "Much better," he said. "You have improved. You have heart." Evan's confidence grew slowly but surely. He understood now that setbacks were not the end, they were a part of the journey. Each failure taught him patience, courage, and resilience. He no longer feared mistakes. Instead, he embraced them, knowing each one brought him closer to his dream. One evening, after months of practice, Mr. Howard called him. "There's a real audition tomorrow," he said. "It's small, but it's important. You're ready, Evan." Evan's heart leapt. He remembered the boy under the bridge, the cold nights, the empty streets. That boy had survived alone, but now Evan had grown. He had learned, worked hard, and accepted help. He would not waste this chance. The next day, Evan walked to the studio with a small bag, his jacket clean, and a notebook under his arm. He felt nervous, but his heart was strong. Inside the audition room, he read his lines with confidence, acted with emotion, and poured his soul into every gesture and word. When he finished, the director's face softened. "You have something real," the director said. "Something no one can teach. You carry it inside." Tears filled Evan's eyes. This moment was his comeback. All the failure, all the loneliness, all the fear, it had led him here. He realized that hard work, patience, and seeking guidance could turn even the darkest nights into bright mornings. That night, Evan returned to the library. He wrote in his notebook, his hand shaking with excitement. "I am not done," he wrote. "I am growing. I am stronger. I am ready for the next step." Evan had faced a huge setback, but he had come back stronger. He learned that failure was not the enemy, it was a teacher. And with courage, persistence, and a little help, he could continue chasing his dreams. Even under the cold night sky, Evan smiled. His small heart was full of hope. He knew this was only the beginning. The streets, the bridges, and the quiet corners of the city were no longer just reminders of hardship, they were symbols of strength. Evan whispered to himself, "I will not stop. I will keep dreaming. I will keep going." And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. Truly believed it. The morning sun barely touched the cold streets as Evan walked toward the biggest moment of his life. His small bag felt heavier than ever, filled with old dreams, new hopes, and a nervous heart. Today was the audition for the independent film, the one that could change everything. Every step he took echoed in his mind. This is it. This is your chance. Don't waste it. As he approached the studio, the building looked enormous, almost like a mountain in the city. The glass windows reflected the busy world outside. People rushing, cars honking, voices shouting. Evan felt small, tiny like a forgotten leaf in a storm. He stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I've come this far. I can do this." Inside, the studio smelled of coffee, paint, and polished floors. The staff moved fast, carrying scripts, cameras, and props. Evan's heart raced, but he reminded himself of all the lessons he had learned. Mr. Howard gave him a nod from the corner, a quiet encouragement. "You've got this," the look seemed to say. The director called Evan's name. His legs shook as he walked into the audition room. It was small but bright, filled with 2 people behind a table, cameras pointed, lights hot. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry, but he remembered the cold streets, the library, the nights under the bridge. He remembered the boy who never gave up. "Stand here," the director said, pointing to a mark on the floor. "This is your scene, a street boy helping a lost child during a storm. Show us everything, fear, hope, courage. Make us feel it." Evan's chest tightened. The storm outside mirrored his nerves. But he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered everything he had lived. The lonely nights, the cold wind, the kindness of strangers, the warmth of a small sandwich, the encouragement from Mr. Howard, all of it came rushing through him. He began slowly, his voice soft, trembling, as if the words were fragile. "Are you okay?" he said, bending slightly toward the imaginary child. His eyes reflected worry and concern. Then the storm in the scene got louder, the imaginary rain, the loud winds, and he shouted with emotion, "Hold my hand. Don't be scared." His body moved naturally, his hands expressive, his face alive with feeling. He stumbled once, forgetting a line, but instead of panicking, he improvised. He acted from his heart, from every tear he had cried, every hunger he had felt, every night he had shivered. The room was silent, but Evan felt the presence of every challenge he had overcome behind him. The director leaned forward, eyes fixed on Evan. He saw the fear, the hope, the courage, all in one small boy who refused to give up. The camera rolled, capturing each moment. Evan cried softly, laughed softly, whispered promises to the lost child, hugged the invisible figure tightly. Every movement told a story. Every word carried his past, his struggles, and his dreams. When the scene ended, Evan stood there, drenched in imaginary rain, breathing hard, heart pounding. Silence filled the room. He thought he had failed, that he had been too small, too broken. But then the director clapped slowly, deliberately and smiled. "That was incredible," he said. "You brought life to the story. You made us feel what it means to survive, to fight, to hope. You are exactly what we were looking for." Evan's knees nearly gave way. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times, but living it was more than he had ever dreamed. He looked at the two people behind the table, the lights, the cameras, and he realized this was real. His heart swelled with pride, relief, and happiness. All the struggles, the cold nights, the empty stomachs, every tear had led him to this moment. "Evan," the director continued, "we want you for the lead child role. It's a small film, but it's powerful. It will be seen. Your story will be seen." Tears ran down Evan's face. He tried to speak but could barely form words. Thank you. I promise I will do my best," he whispered, voice trembling. The director nodded. "We believe in you. Go home, rest, and start preparing. Tomorrow, your journey begins." Evan walked out of the studio slowly, the world outside looking different. The streets were still noisy, the wind still cold, but he felt taller, stronger, and lighter. He remembered the boy who slept under bridges, the empty library nights, the countless hours of practice, and the hope that never died. For the first time, Evan understood the true meaning of his journey. The climb had been hard, the nights had been cold, and the challenges almost too big, but he had survived. He had fought. He had never given up. And now, standing at the edge of his biggest moment, he felt unstoppable. That night, under the stars, Evan wrote in his notebook, words flowing like a river of dreams. "I have reached the highest peak I could see. Tomorrow I climb even higher. I am ready for everything because I never stopped believing. I never stopped trying. I am Evan, and my story has just begun." Evan smiled at the sky, whispering quietly, "This is my moment. And I will make it count." The days after the audition were long and tense for Evan. Every morning he woke early, his heart full of hope but also nervousness. He walked past the same cold streets, the same broken benches, the same quiet library where he had hidden from the world. But now, everything felt different. He had touched a dream with his own hands, and no one could take that away. A week passed slowly. Evan practiced his lines every night under the flickering streetlights. He acted for the stars, for the wind, for anyone who would watch. He remembered the faces of the small children in the neighborhood, the lonely boys and girls sleeping under bridges, and he promised himself he would make them proud. Then, one bright morning, the call came. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone. A warm voice said, "Evan, we want you for the lead role. We believe in you. Come to the studio tomorrow morning." Evan could hardly speak. His heart raced, his legs shook, and tears filled his eyes. He whispered, thank you so much," again and again. That night, he could not sleep. He sat by the small window of his tiny rented room, holding the paper with the studio address, imagining the journey ahead. He could see the cameras, the lights, the set, and most of all, he could see himself standing tall, finally alive in the way he had always dreamed. The next morning, Evan walked to the studio, his bag light but his heart heavy with excitement. The streets looked brighter, the air warmer. People passed by, rushing to work, but Evan barely noticed. Today was not about them. It was about him, about his journey, about the boy who never gave up. Inside the studio, everything was bigger, brighter, and more alive than he had imagined. Cameras rolled, lights shone hot, and people moved with purpose. Evan met the director again, a kind man with sharp eyes, and the assistant handed him his costume. It was simple, a small jacket, worn shoes, but to Evan, it felt like armor. The filming began. Evan acted his heart out. He helped the lost child in the storm, guided them to safety, comforted them with gentle words. He laughed, he cried, he ran, he fell. Everything was real because he had lived every emotion before. The director shouted, "Cut!" and walked up to him, eyes wide with admiration. "Evan, that was perfect. Every tear, every smile, it is all you. You are the soul of this story." Evan felt a warmth he had never felt before. It was not the fame, not the applause, not even the money. It was the feeling that he mattered, that his struggles, his nights under cold bridges, his hungry days, had led him here. He was not invisible anymore. He was seen. He was alive. Days turned into weeks. The film wrapped up. Evan walked home through the streets that had once seemed cruel and endless. But now they were familiar, friendly even. He passed the old library, touched the cold walls, and whispered, "Thank you." Every corner of the city held memories of the boy he used to be, and every step forward was proof of how far he had come. The film was released. Small articles appeared in local newspapers. People in the streets recognized him. Children smiled at him, eyes wide, whispering, "That's the boy from the movie." Evan smiled back, feeling the warmth of connection, the power of hope. But even with recognition, Evan stayed humble. He continued visiting shelters, helping children who slept hungry and cold, just like he had. He told them stories of courage, of never giving up, of chasing dreams even when the world seemed against them. He gave them small sandwiches, small notes, and most importantly, small hope. One evening, sitting on the roof of his building, sipping cheap coffee, Evan looked at the city lights twinkling below. The streets were still noisy, the night still cold, but he no longer feared them. He had learned that even in darkness, light could be found. Even in hunger, hope could grow. Even in silence, courage could speak. Evan opened his notebook and wrote, "I am still the boy who slept under bridges. I am still the boy who dreamed with an empty stomach. But I am also the boy who believed, who acted, who never gave up. Dreams are not always easy, but they are worth every tear, every struggle, every lonely night. To anyone listening, never stop. Keep walking. Keep hoping. Keep believing. Your moment will come." He looked at the stars, whispered quietly, "Thank you," and smiled. For the first time, Evan felt complete peace. He had survived the cold, the hunger, the loneliness. He had fought for his dreams and had begun to live them. And in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The city continued to move around him, but Evan walked forward, step by step, each one lighter than the last. His story was no longer just about survival. It was about hope, courage, and the power of never giving up. And that story, he knew, would inspire others for years to come. Evan's journey had ended one chapter, but the next chapter, the one of life, of dreams, of helping others, was waiting. And he was ready.